This is a subscription-only audiobook podcast featuring Nicola Knobel reading each chapter of her book, Unmasking Leadership, Neurodivergent Leaders, Psychological Safety, and the Future of Inclusive Workplaces. This series is for listeners who want to understand how leadership, safety, and inclusion actually operate beneath the surface. The book explores how neurodivergent people experience work, why psychological safety often fails in practice, and how systems designed to protect people can instead create harm. Chapters are released regularly and are presented in full, allowing the ideas to be heard without simplification or sound bites. Thank you for choosing to listen in full.
Part B, Chapter 4. What is neurodiversity? When I first started investigating the term neurodiversity, I realized just how none of what I'd been taught about leadership considered the possibility that different minds might need different conditions. The word itself was coined by sociologist Judy Singer in the late 1990s to describe the natural variation in human cognitive functioning, differences in perception, attention, communication, and learning that appear across the entire population. Singer's original focus was on autism and the emerging autistic rights movement, but the concept has since broadened to include ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, and many other ways of thinking and being. Atkinson and Smith, 2022. The point is not to treat these differences as deficits, but as part of human variation. As one neurodiversity hub puts it, every human has a unique nervous system with a unique combination of abilities and needs. The shift from medical to social model. Historically, conditions such as autism or ADHD were treated under the medical model of disability, that is, the individual is defective and must be fixed or cured. In contrast, the social model argues that disability arises not just from impairment, but from the interaction between a person and a non-inclusive environment. Oliver, 2013. Neurodiversity builds on these ideas by suggesting that cognitive difference is part of the human condition. Singer herself used a biodiversity metaphor, asking why we don't accept neurovariation the way we accept ecological variation. Why not propose that just as biodiversity is essential to ecosystem stability, so neurodiversity may be essential for cultural stability? In practice, this means that the average brain leadership models rely on simply doesn't exist. Every team already contains a spectrum of cognitive styles. The real question for organizations and leaders is, will we design for that fact or will we ignore it? Why I'm focused on autism plus ADHD. In my own professional journey, I focus on AuDHD, the overlap of autism and ADHD, for three reasons. First, because I live it. I am both autistic and ADHD, and that lived experience informs how I see leadership, energy, and recovery. Second, because these two conditions are among the most commonly recognized neurodivergent profiles globally. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, 2023. National Institute for Health and Care Excellence, 2022. Yet the combination of both remains under-examined, despite evidence that 30 to 50% of autistic people also meet criteria for ADHD, and many ADHD-diagnosed adults share autistic traits. Laujo et al., 2019, Anshel and Russo, 2019. Third, because the intersection between them reveals something most leadership models miss. It's not just what you can do, but how you do it, when you do it, and under what conditions you recover. The AuDHD experience amplifies that truth. It demonstrates how performance, creativity, and well-being are never just personal traits. They are environmental outcomes.
Let's take a quick break here. If you would like to support this work, you can head to nicolanobel.com to check out the book, subscription options, and a small range of merch designed for neurodivergent thinkers and leaders. Your support helps keep this project independent and accessible. Now back to the chapter.
Understanding key neurodivergent profiles. When we talk about neurodiversity, it helps to understand that it is not one experience, but a spectrum of many. Each neurotype brings its own strengths, challenges, and environmental needs. No two people experience these traits the same way, but understanding broad patterns helps leaders design for variety rather than uniformity. Autism spectrum. Autism affects how people communicate, process information, and experience the world. It is estimated that about 1 in 36 children and roughly 1 to 2% of adults meet diagnostic criteria. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, 2023. Autistic individuals often show strong attention to detail, deep focus, and integrity in work, but may experience sensory overload, social fatigue, or communication strain in environments built for constant interaction. Hull et al., 2017. In the workplace, autistic professionals are overrepresented in technical and analytical roles, such as IT, data, and engineering, yet remain underrepresented in leadership positions. This is not due to lack of capability, but to organizational cultures that equate sociability with competence. Austin and Pisano, 2017. Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, ADHD. ADHD is characterized by differences in attention regulation, motivation, and executive function. It is one of the most common neurodevelopmental conditions, affecting approximately 5% of adults worldwide. Faraone et al. 2021. ADHD is not a lack of attention. It is a difference in how attention is distributed and managed. There are 3 recognized presentations of ADHD, American Psychiatric Association 2013. 1. Predominantly inattentive type, often associated with difficulties sustaining focus, following through on detailed tasks, and managing time or organization. People with this presentation may appear distracted or daydreamy, though internally their attention is often overloaded with competing stimuli. 2. Predominantly hyperactive impulsive type, characterized by high physical or mental energy, restlessness, and rapid decision making. This group may interrupt, speak quickly, or struggle to pause when engaged. 3. Combined type, the most common in adults, involving features of both inattentiveness and hyperactivity to impulsivity. Many adults with this presentation describe cycles of intense productivity, followed by periods of mental fatigue or executive shutdown. Each type can look very different in practice, particularly between genders. For example, inattentive traits are often under-identified in women who may present as anxious or perfectionistic, rather than hyperactive. Quinn and Madhu, 2014. At work, ADHD can manifest as bursts of creativity, strong intuition under pressure, and the ability to think laterally or generate rapid solutions. White and Shah, 2006. Many leaders with ADHD describe thriving in crisis situations or fast-paced environments. However, they may struggle in settings that rely on routine, prolonged concentration, or delayed feedback loops. Workplaces that value flexibility, autonomy, and outcome-based performance tend to harness ADHD strengths most effectively. Conversely, rigid structures and high administrative load can drain motivation and trigger burnout. Supporting ADHD employees through clear communication, flexible deadlines, and visual planning tools benefits everyone, not just those with the diagnosis.
A quick pause before we continue. If you would like practical tools to support neurodivergent thinking at work, there are free resources available on NicolaKnobel.com. These include downloadable guides and templates designed to support focus, regulation, and safer ways of working. You can download them now, no subscription required. Now back to the chapter.
Autism plus ADHD, AuDHD. Where autism and ADHD intersect, we find an often overlooked population. Estimates suggest that 30 to 50% of autistic people also meet diagnostic criteria for ADHD, and many adults with ADHD show overlapping autistic traits. Anshel and Russo, 2019, Lauju et al., 2019. This overlap can intensify both focus and fatigue. People with ADHD often navigate two internal pull factors. One part of their brain craving structure and consistency, and another part constantly seeking variety, momentum, and stimulation. A brief history of the AuDHD diagnosis. For much of the 20th century, autism and ADHD were considered mutually exclusive. Diagnostic manuals such as the DSM-4, 1994, and ICD-10, 1992 explicitly stated that the two conditions could not be diagnosed together. American Psychiatric Association, 1994, World Health Organization, 1992. 1992. This artificial divide meant that people who clearly exhibited traits of both were often misdiagnosed, underdiagnosed, or placed in clinical grey zones. By the early 2000s, research began to challenge that separation. Studies of overlapping attention, executive function, and sensory processing differences showed that many individuals met the criteria for both. Rommelzy et al., 2010. The DSM-5, 2013, formally recognized that autism spectrum disorder, ASD, and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, can co-occur. A change that finally validated what clinicians and families had long observed. American Psychiatric Association, 2013. Since then, understanding of AuDHD has expanded rapidly. Clinical and neuroimaging research suggests shared neurobiological pathways involving dopamine regulation, frontal striatal networks, and sensory integration. Leitner, 2014, Cooper et al., 2024. Yet despite this progress, AuDHD remains under-researched and under-recognized, particularly among adults and women. Many individuals receive one diagnosis in childhood and discover the other later in life, often after years of unexplained exhaustion or a persistent sense of misfit in education or work. Anshel and Russo, 2019. Often after years of unexplained exhaustion or misfit in educational and professional settings. Today, AuDHD is gaining more attention as professionals and advocates highlight the unique lived experience of managing both structure and spontaneity within one brain. In workplace contexts, this combination can produce exceptional creativity, problem solving, and moral clarity, but also significant vulnerability to burnout if environments demand continuous adaptation without recovery. As understanding grows, so too does the opportunity to design leadership and work systems that honor both sides of this neurotype, allowing for innovation without chaos, focus without rigidity, and recovery without guilt. Dyslexia. Dyslexia affects around 10% of the global population. British Dyslexia Association, 2023. It primarily influences how people process written language, but it is also associated with strong visual spatial reasoning, creativity, and big picture thinking. In the workplace, dyslexic professionals often excel in strategy, innovation, and storytelling. IDAY and IDAY 2011. However, standardized documentation systems, word-heavy communication, and tight reading writing deadlines can create unnecessary friction. Accessible formatting, verbal options, and assistive technologies can transform those barriers into neutral ground. Dyspraxia, developmental coordination disorder, Dyspraxia affects approximately 6% of adults with varying levels of impact. Kirby et al. Guy, 2019. It influences motor coordination, spatial awareness, and sometimes speech or organizational sequencing. People with dyspraxia are often described as creative problem solvers with strong empathy and persistence. In the workplace, difficulties can arise with fine motor tasks, time management, or rapid shifts between cognitive and physical activities. Yet, dyspraxic employees often bring innovative, people centered thinking that improves systems and relationships when given time and structure to work effectively.
If you are finding this series useful, subscribing really helps. It means you get each new chapter as it's released, and it signals to the platform that this content is worth sharing. Leaving a quick review also makes a genuine difference to Nicola. Reviews help this reach a wider audience, especially people who are looking for leadership, psychological safety, and neurodiversity content that goes deeper than sound bites. Thank you for supporting independent work like this. Back to the chapter.
The evidence for neurodiverse teams. There is growing evidence that neuro-inclusive teams can outperform more homogeneous ones if they are managed with intention. For example, research involving large technology companies, SAP and Microsoft, found that neurodiverse teams who received support around communication differences and psychological safety went on to deliver stronger innovation outcomes. More broadly, the consulting firm Deloitte frames neuroinclusion as a competitive advantage in their 2024 report, stating that neurodiverse talent can drive breakthrough ideas and strategic agility when the right conditions are in place. These findings align with my lived experience. The traits I spent years hiding, hyperfocus, pattern recognition, fairness driven work, are precisely the ones that matter when people are given the space to contribute in their own way. Implications for leadership and workplace design. If we accept that neurodiversity is present, not emergent, then leadership cannot continue as if there is one optimal way to think, lead, or communicate. That means design matters. Leaders must create roles, processes, and communication systems that accommodate different brains. For example, providing agenda clarity, asynchronous options, written summaries, sensory aware spaces. Shift from fit the person to fit the system. Instead of asking individuals to adapt to the culture, we redesign systems so they adapt to the person. This concept is sometimes called dignity-based design. Rethink leadership traits. The traits often rewarded in leadership programs, charisma, fluency, spontaneity, become less useful when the brain you're leading is processing differently. When someone needs structure or time to calibrate, those traits may be signals of unsuitability, not strength. Embed psychological safety. True inclusion for neurodiverse teams doesn't start with awareness training. It starts with safety. When people know they won't be penalized for thinking differently or needing support, they can contribute fully. Edmondson, 2018.
Thank you for listening to Unmasking Leadership. By choosing to listen to this work in full, you are supporting deeper conversations about leadership, safety, and inclusion, and the space to sit with ideas that are often rushed or avoided at work. Your support makes this project possible. Until next time, thank you for being here.